Fiction refers to a story that comes from a writer's imagination, as opposed to one based strictly on fact or a true story. A work of fiction can refer to a short story, novella, and novel. Every work of fiction falls into a subgenre, each with its own style, tone, elements, and storytelling devices. Today we're going to talk about the different fictional genres that you may encounter while reading a story or watching a film. These are also the same fictional genres that you may select in writing your own fictional story. The first one is fantasy. Fantasy is a story that is imaginative, but could never really happen. The setting may be of another world. Characters might be magical, like talking animals, sorceries, witches, and wizardry. It is a genre of imaginative fiction involving magic and adventure, especially in a setting other than the real world. Many fantasy novels involve adventure as a key feature. Characters may discover portals to other worlds or discover hidden magic, wonder, and surprise in our own world. Novels from C.S. Lewis' classic Chronicles of Narnia series to J.K. Rowling's Harry Potter series populate imaginary worlds with mythical beasts, power-seeking tyrants, and more. Characters adventure through worlds where the impossible is possible. Exploring the impossible is another common element in fantasy. Magical wands may weave spells that defy the laws of physics as we know them. Other times, magic is spoken, chanted, or ripples through land and landscape. The first element is magic. The word magic comes from the Greek magikos from magus. This means one of the members of the learned and priestly class. This explains how magic in fantasy is often associated with learning, with complex books and rituals. Magic in great books takes many forms. The apprentice wizards in J.K. Rowling's Harry Potter duel with wands. In C.S. Lewis' Narnia series, a witch casts a spell over the kingdom of Narnia, plunging into eternal winter. She also destroys a secondary world by speaking the deplorable word. The second element is adventure. Adventure in fantasy is common from bands of traveling, questing heroes like Frodo and Prose in Tolkien's The Lord of the Rings, to girls who fall down magical rabbit holes such as in Alice in Wonderland. The third element is struggle for mystery. Themes of struggle and mystery are found in many forms throughout many fantasy novels. Part of this is due to fantasy's origins and ideas of arcane, special yet volatile and dangerous knowledge. The initiate often must learn to control the unpredictable surges of wild magic to trace or utter the right thing to achieve the desired effect. This process of struggle and mastery is often shown in character development. Sometimes characters use the power irresponsibly. For example, a character tries to ruin the magical game of the airborne sport Quidditch in Rowling's fantasy series. Struggle in fantasy fiction includes struggle for mastery of self, or understanding and using one's own power effectively or wisely, or the conflict between those who use their own magical mastery for positive or destructive ends. And the last element is setting. Because of his exploration of the otherworldly and the supernatural, place is a key aspect of many fantasy novels. Some places are created through magic. The lion Aslan sings the kingdom of Narnia into being in C.S. Lewis lore. By contrast, Jadis, the White Witch, destroys a whole world by speaking a powerful word. So in fantasy, we often strongly experience both characters' effects on their world and their world effects and influence on them. These are some of the literary pieces under fantasy genre. The Tale of Peter Rabbit by Beatrix Potter, The Adventures of Pinocchio by Carlo Collodi, Charlie and the Chocolate Factory by Roald Dahl, Alice's Adventures in Wonderland by Lewis Carroll, Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone by J.K. Rowling, Gulliver's Travels by Jonathan Swift, and The Lord of the Rings Trilogy or The Hobbit by J.R.R. Tolkien. Next, let's talk about historical fiction. Historical fiction is a story that takes place in historically accurate time and setting. The characters and some events are fictional. Historical fiction transports readers to another time and place, either real or imagined. Writing historical fiction requires a balance of research and creativity. And while it often includes real people and events, the genre offers a fiction writer many opportunities to tell a wholly unique story. So what are the elements of historical fiction? First, we have the setting, and the setting is the most important part of a historical fiction novel. It should take place during an authentic period in history and be set in a real historical place. For example, New York City during the Great Depression or Paris, France during World War II. The plot in a historical fiction novel is a combination of real events and fictional events. You can invent characters, cities, and events, but they still must make sense to the time period. For example, a novel set in London, England in 1666 would benefit from incorporating the Great Fire of London, which is a major turning point in the city's history. The characters in historical fiction can be real, fictional, or both, but they should all look, speak, and act in ways that accurately reflect the era. For example, if you are writing a book about Mary Tudor, it shouldn't disregard or reinvent her family history as the daughter of Henry VIII and sister to Elizabeth I, who both played an important role in Mary's reign. Dialogue. The dialogue must be authentic to the time period and should reflect the status of the characters who are speaking. For example, British soldiers in the Revolutionary War wouldn't use Western slang of today, right? And conflict. The problems the characters encounter should be conflicts people of that era would encounter. For example, your book might describe the hesitation and fear German soldiers feel as he enters the Eastern Front, where he knows he is likely to die. Examples of historical novels are All the Light We Cannot See by Anthony Doerr, a story of a blind French girl and a German boy's paths collide in occupied France as both they try to survive the devastation of World War II. The Color Purple by Alice Walker, set in the deep American South between wars, Celia, a young black girl born into poverty and segregation, leads a very hard life. War and Peace by Leo Tolstoy. War and Peace is an in-depth study of the Napoleonic War's effects on 5 Russian aristocrats and their families. The Book Thief by Markus Zusak. A young foster girl, Liselle Meminger, steals books to fund her meager existence near Munich during World War II. And The Memoirs of Geisha by Arthur Golden, delving deep into Japanese culture before and during World War II. Next, science fiction. It is a story that is typically set in the future or on other planets. It is based on the impact of actual, imagined, or potential science. It is a type of imaginative literature. It provides a mental picture of something that may happen on realistic scientific principles and facts. This fiction might portray, for instance, a world where young people are living on Mars. Hence, it is also called as a futuristic fiction. It dramatizes the wonders of technology and resembles heroic fantasy where magic is substituted with technology. Often called sci-fi, it is a genre of fiction literature whose content is imaginative but based in science. It relies heavily on scientific facts, theories, and principles as support for its settings, characters, themes, and plot lines, which is what makes it different from fantasy. Historically, it has been a popular form for not only authors but scientists as well. In the past 150 years, science fiction has become a huge genre, with a particularly large presence in film and television. In fact, the TV network Sci-Fi is completely devoted to science fiction media. It is a particularly fascinating and mind-bending genre for audiences because of its connection to reality. These are some of the literary pieces under science fiction genre. The Avengers, Frankenstein, or The Modern Prometheus by Mary Wollstonecraft Shelley. 1984 by George Orwell. Fahrenheit 451 by Ray Bradbury. The Time Machine by H.G. Wells. Men in Black 3 by Barry Sonnenfeld. Planet of the Apes by Franklin J. Schaffner. And The Matrix by Wachowski brothers. Mystery fiction. Mystery is a genre of literature whose stories focus on a puzzling crime, situation, or circumstance that needs to be solved. The term comes from the Latin mysterium, meaning a secret thing. Stories can either be fictional or non-fictional and can focus on both supernatural and non-supernatural topics. Many mystery stories involve what is called a whodunit scenario, meaning the mystery revolves around the uncovering of a culprit or a criminal. Some mystery novels break from the traditional format to heighten suspense or play with readers' expectations, but generally, most mysteries follow roughly the same structure, which starts with a crime, where the audience is introduced to the crime around which the story is based, and then investigation. The detective works on solving the mystery, they question each suspect, search for clues, and follow new leads in hopes of finding the guilty party. And then the twist, the detective finds a new clue an unexpected lead, or a crack in a suspect's alibi that shocks them and the reader and changes the course of the investigation. Followed by the breakthrough. The detective uncovers the last remaining piece of the puzzle and solves the mystery. And conclusion, the culprit is caught and all outstanding questions are solved. These are some of the literary pieces under mystery fiction genre. The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo by Stieg Larsson. A runaway bestseller, The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo has everything a mystery requires. Murder, family ties, love in the air, and financial shenanigans. What happened to Harriet Granger, who disappeared 40 years ago? Michael Blomqvist, a disgraced journalist, and Lisbeth Salander, a tattooed and pierced hacker genius, are on the case. They uncover family iniquity and corruption at the top of Sweden's industrial ladder. And then there were None by Agatha Christie. 10 people, strangers, gather on a private island as weekend guests of an insane, eccentric millionaire. These strangers have secrets to keep, but one by one, they are murdered. They all have something in common, though. They each have a wicked past they're hiding, a secret that seals their fate. Only the dead are above suspicion. And The Curious Incident of the Dog in the Nighttime by Mark Haddon. Christopher John Francis Boone's logical mind can find patterns and rules for everything but has little time or inclination for understanding human emotions. When his neighbor's dog Wellington is killed, he starts a quest to find the killer using Sherlock Holmes as his model. Next, we have realistic fiction. Realistic fiction attempts to portray the world as it is. It contains no fantasy, no supernatural elements, and it usually depicts ordinary people going about the business of daily living, with all its joys, sorrows, successes, and failures. So what are the characteristics of a realistic fiction? A quick way to classify a story or novel as realistic fiction is to identify the following characteristics within that literary work. Number 1, realistic fiction stories tend to take place in the present or recent past. 2, characters are involved in events that could happen. 3, characters live in places that could be or are real. 4, characters seem like real people with real issues solved in a realistic way. So say goodbyes to stories containing vampires, werewolves, sorcerers, dragons, zombies, etc. And the events portrayed in realistic fiction conjure questions that a reader could face in everyday life. These are some of the literary pieces under the realistic fiction genre. The Fault in Our Stars by John Green. John Green's fourth novel, The Fault in Our Stars, has gained a following among tween and teen readers. This is partly due to its tragic love story, but may also be due to its thought-provoking subject matter. The book explores philosophical questions about the meaning of life, death, and suffering. While adults may find the topics in this novel heavy and too mature for children, Green believes that young readers are probably already thinking about them. Number 2, The Diary of a Wimpy Kid by Jeff Kinney. Diary of a Wimpy Kid, a realistic fiction novel, humorously describes the troubles of being in middle school and trying to fit in with integrated text and drawings. This is the first book in the immensely popular Diary of a Wimpy Kid series. And number 3, A Walk to Remember by Nicholas Sparks. Every April when the wind blows from the sea and mingles with the scent of lilacs, Landon Carter remembers his last year at Beaufort High. It was 1958 and Landon had already dated a girl or two. He even swore that he had once been in love. Certainly the last person in town he thought he'd fall for was Jamie Sullivan, the daughter of the town's Baptist minister, a quiet girl who always carried the Bible with her school books. Jamie seemed content living in a world apart from the other teens. She took care of her widowed father, rescued hurt animals, and helped out at the local orphanage. No boy had ever asked her out. Landon would never have dreamed of it. Then a twist of fate made Jamie his partner for the homecoming dance, and Landon Carter's life will never be the same. Being with Jamie would show him the depths of the human heart and lead him to a decision so stunning it would send him irrevocably on the road to manhood. Horror. Horror is a genre of storytelling intended to scare, shock, and thrill its audience. Horror can be interpreted in many different ways, but there is often a central villain, monster, or threat that is often a reflection of the fears being experienced by society at the time. This person or creature is called the other, a term that refers to someone that is feared because they are different or misunderstood. This is also why the horror genre has changed so much over the years. As culture and fears change, so does horror. The Gothic novel, a genre of horror that focuses specifically on death, originated in the 18th century and is exemplified by the author Edgar Allan Poe. Horror literature in the 19th century and the 20th century is often focused on tales involving occult ideas like Mary Shelley's Frankenstein in 1818 or Bram Stoker's Dracula in 1897. Modern horror novels have expanded the genre to include new elements and contemporary themes like serial killers and slasher stories. Stephen King's The Shining in 1997 is a perfect example, as well as genre mashups that combine horror with historical fantasy and modern interpretations of fantastical creatures like ghosts, vampires, werewolves, and witches. Another genre is adventure. It is a story where a protagonist and other major characters are placed in dangerous situations. The characters must use their wit and skills to defeat the antagonist. Adventure is a remarkable or unexpected journey, experience, or event that a person participates in as a result of chance. So this last detail, a result of chance, is a key element of adventure. The stories usually involve a character who is brought to the adventure by chance. A chance usually plays a large role in the episodes of the story. Also, adventures usually includes dangerous situations, narrow escapes, problems to be solved through intelligence and skill, exotic people and places, and brave deeds. Examples of adventure stories are Tom Sawyer, Gulliver's Travel, Hook, and Treasure Planet. Folktales. These include fable, which is a brief story that is meant to tell a lesson or a moral. The characters are usually animals with human characteristics. A fairy tale, which is a story that has magical elements. The characters are usually fairies, giants, elves, and other magical creatures. Legend, a story usually about a national or folk hero. This story takes place in a particular time and place and is partly true and partly fiction. The character traits of the hero are typically exaggerated. Tall tale, a humorous story with extreme exaggerations. The main character or hero usually does impossible things with ease. And myth, a story that is often based on a historical event that is meant to serve as an explanation for some phenomenon of nature or human behavior. Characters are usually gods. So which genre should you write? The best way to answer that question is to ask yourself what you love to read. If you enjoy reading a particular genre, you'll be much better at writing it. It can also be fun to explore a new genre, first as a reader and then as a writer. Whatever types of fiction you choose, reading is probably the most important thing you can do for your writing. Read the type of fiction you want to write. For example, if you want to write short stories, you should read a lot of stories. That's how you'll develop a feeling for the form.